Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome back to the Gifts of Glory podcast, where we celebrate and promote men and women of God that use their gifts, passions, desires, and talents to honor and glorify our God. And just to let everyone know, with PureFest and the Decent Comedy Show coming up this weekend, I'm going to take a hiatus from the podcast. I'm going to take 2 weeks off. The next 2 weeks are scheduled off to give me a chance to decompress after the mad sprint to the finish line, because a lot of work has gone into PureFest, a lot of work going into the Decent Comedy Show at Second City this coming Sunday night. So we're going to take 2 weeks off of the podcast, return on Wednesday, October 16th, with an all-new podcast. A guest will be announced later on. Now, as this podcast goes live, we are just 3 days away from PureFest. PureFest is for all folks of all backgrounds, of all ages. We have performers from all over the country coming to perform. Get your tickets now at purefest2019.eventbrite.com. purefest2019.eventbrite.com. Tickets are just $10 or $35 for the whole family if you got 4 or more people. Tickets are a suggested donation and can be paid cash at the door if you don't want to go through Eventbrite. Now, mark your calendars. Invite your family, your friends, your co-workers, your church, your small group, and join us on Saturday, September 28th, 1 p.m., Cross Point Church, Lockport, Illinois. Tickets and more information at purefest.org. And now, one of those people that's performing coming up on Saturday at PureFest his name is Ryder Tam. He's a comedian, he's an improviser, and a man with a very important job, and a job I hope we don't get into trouble for talking about here on the podcast. But Ryder and a couple of his teammates from Oxymorons Comedy, based in Colorado Springs, they're making the trek down the Rocky Mountains and all the way here to the Midwest to Lockport for PureFest this weekend. Friday night, all the performers are going to get together, have some fellowship time, a meal, and then on Saturday, it's game on. It's time to play. All 10 acts will be ready for a wonderful afternoon. We hope to see you there at Cross Point Church, Saturday, September 28th. 1 p.m. door is the showtime. Doors open at 12. 10 acts. You're not going to want to miss these acts. We got amazing talent coming to town. But now let's get to our conversation with one of those people that's performing. He's from Oxymorons Comedy in the Denver area. His name is Ryder Tam, right here on the Gifts for Glory podcast. And I'm now joined by Ryder Tam. Ryder, coming to us from Colorado. He is a member of Oxymorons Comedy, which will be performing at PureFest coming up on September 28th, which will, as we post this podcast, will be this coming Saturday. So he's going to make the trek all the way down from the Rocky Mountains to Chicago. And Ryder, welcome to the Gifts of Glory podcast. How you doing?
Thanks so much, Dave. I'm doing very well. Excited to be here. Excited to be there. Excited to be everywhere. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, for those that don't know, PureFest is it's a faith-based festival for teams that are Christian, that do clean and family-friendly entertainment, whether it's comedy. We have a couple of drama ministry teams. But it's going to be a great afternoon. We've got a total of 10 different acts from all over the country. As we mentioned, Ryder's coming from Colorado with a few members of Oxymorons Comedy. And he's also going to be performing as part of our wild card teams, because we'll have teams that are comprised of different individuals from around the country to create kind of an impromptu improv team. So he's going to be performing twice on the stage at PureFest. So Ryder, first, tell us a little bit about Oxymorons Comedy. Tell us about maybe how it got started and what your mission is with Oxymorons.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Dave. So Oxymorons Comedy started last year, and the people in it kind of had the idea of doing ministry through comedy in areas that you might not normally see it. So I think there's some other groups out in Colorado Springs that have a kind of faith-based orientation, but a lot of them, I think in general, tend to stay in like a very churchy setting, and we wanted to be able to go to other places, maybe bars or things like that, where you might not normally go to, and also just to have a group that could be really funny and be able to show people that might not normally go to like a Christian event or Christian comedy show or something like that, and say like, hey, this is what we do, and uh, we can spread that in places where you might not normally see it. So I'd say I think it was October of last year when we first got started, and we've been performing since the beginning of the year as a group with Oxymorons Comedy. A lot of us have been performing individually with other groups for a lot longer than that. I've been performing since 2012 personally, and some of the members of the group have been performing together with other groups for several years around Colorado Springs and Denver areas since before that.
So did you guys know each other outside, or how did the collection meet and decide to form a team?
Yeah, so our it's a collection. Trip Uhalt is our de facto leader, but he likes to say that it's kind of everyone's group. And so he and the other two original members that came together were working together on a different team in town for a couple of years, I think, and so they wanted to branch out and do more than that. So their original auditions, I just found, and I've been doing improv for a while around town, so I thought that was a cool idea. Showed up, they told me what their vision was, and I was all on board with it. So that was I think everyone got together initially. We just had an audition actually and picked up a new member we're pretty excited about.
All right. It sounds very similar to how Well-Versed came about. Is none of us go to church together. We just connected through various sources, through Backstage.com, which is a casting website, and different things. And the one thing that gives me hope when things kind of are a struggle is that it seems like this is a team that God's put together, because otherwise, if God hadn't ordained it, we probably would never have met. And it sounds kind of similar to kind of how he put together Oxymorons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone in our group brings a different viewpoint, a different aspect. I think we all come from different backgrounds, and that's really cool to be a part of. For me, definitely, and I guess for my specific background with joining Oxymorons, it was a little different because I wasn't planning on joining initially. I was pretty busy at the time. Had been involved with a number of different projects, but I thought, so when I first saw it, I thought, okay, it's just another team. But so I was gonna check it out without any, honestly, and I was not planning on joining. But then when I heard about what their vision was and their mission to be able to go and do bigger things and to minister in places that you, like I said, that you wouldn't normally see a group like that, then I became very interested, and since then we've been able to do a lot of really cool projects. We've been performing in bars and in churches, and we've managed to reach a lot of people. We've gotten really great feedback from some people that have said it's helped them in their life if they're dealing with things, and able to bring a little joy to them. And every show we try and raise money for charity, and that's such an awesome thing to be a part of as well. But for me, yeah, I definitely think it wasn't something I was planning on doing, and I just kind of popped in on a whim, and now it's a much bigger thing for me.
So the name, was that determined before you came in, or is that something that kind of collaborated after they got the roster together?
That was determined beforehand. Yeah.
I mean, it's really a genius name, because it almost sounds insulting, obviously, but when you listen to it, you realize, oh, it's got that double meaning, and it's that unexpected thing, like an oxymoron. It's an ingenious name. So I was really excited when I saw you guys pop up as interested in potentially being a part of PureFest.
Cool. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. So I know that there's a couple other, I think, oxymorons around the country, but It's Oxymorons Comedy is ours,
Mm-hmm.
to be clear.
It's very cool. Now let's talk about Ryder. Let's talk about your journey. You've done improv, you said, since about 2012. But has it always been driven by faith, or at what point in your comedy did you find faith?
Yeah, I mean, I would say no. This, that's an interesting question. I mean, Oxymorons Comedy is the only faith-based group that I'm involved with per se. So I think originally I would say I didn't start out that way, but it's definitely comedy and faith is something that they're tied together
Mm-hmm.
for me, I would say. And so I found, gosh, I used to be super, super, super shy, and now I'm just a little bit less. When I was growing up, and it wasn't until early in college that I started finding performance through theater
Mm-hmm.
originally, and finding that I really felt like it was my calling. It was something that I really enjoyed, and I felt like I had a bit of a knack for, and um, being able to reach people, to bring people, to help make people just a little bit happier on a day-to-day basis is something that's, I think, really important, really powerful, and for me, I mean, I think comes from God.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, I mean, if you want to get into the technical, the more nitty-gritty kind of side, I feel like humor is underrated in society. I think it's so important, and it's something that doesn't really make sense. It's illogical, right?
Right.
It's hard to define comedy, and there's no real logical reason to have it. And to me, that's kind of an indication that um, it comes from God.
Right.
And I think that's why we have a sense of humor personally, and it helps us deal with life. So I started feeling that, I think, earlier on, even though I wasn't directly involved with a group like Oxymorons Comedy. So yeah, so that's kind of my standpoint. Is it something in general that's really important?
Mm-hmm.
And when if you're doing good comedy that uplifts people, you don't have to be, you don't have to be preaching or giving a direct message, uh, like you're in church or something like that. To me, if you're uplifting people and just making them happier
Mm-hmm.
with comedy, then I think you're doing God's work.
Absolutely. And I take that stance too when Well-Versed performs that if there's a opportunity to share gospel or testimony from the stage, that's great, and that's a kind of like the icing on the cake. But like I said, just being there to uplift people and to bring joy and happiness, God can still minister through that, even if the name of Jesus is not spoken, even if God's name is not spoken. Just by being there and being present and operating in the talents that He's given us, I think becomes a ministry in of itself, because people are then attracted to the light that you bring, and maybe they find out why you perform clean. Maybe they find out what motivates you and what makes you different than other comedians they've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had that happen personally a couple times, and it's really great to see, because I think that's, from what I've seen anecdotally, I think being preachy with people is almost never a great way of
Mm-hmm.
attracting people to Christianity. Ones that aren't already involved in it anyways, and I've
Right.
had friends that are become kind of interested in seeing what the church might have to offer, what Christianity might have to offer, because they see me and see what I do on a day-to-day basis, outside of things that are really preachy. They say, "Oh, wow, this is, you're doing really cool things," or just the way that you are. Maybe this is something that I want to look more into,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, you know, trying to hit him over the head with the Bible.
Right. So that usually doesn't work. And you just look at the ministry of Jesus himself. The only ones he really ever came after were the ones that were oppressing and using the Bible to hurt other people. They're using the scriptures against people. And just like, no, you guys are a brood of vipers. You're basically sons of snakes. You guys are not doing the right thing. But the sinners who are lost in their sin, there was that compassion, that relationship that he brought, instead of beating them over the head with the Torah.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I mean, Jesus walked with sinners, right? And how do you reach people like that without getting out there and talking to them? So that's, I think, part of the vision of Oxymorons Comedy as well, is to get out of just like performing at churches and whatnot, and go out to comedy clubs or bars where you might not see a Christian group, and be able to say, hey, this is what we do. We're having a great time. We're doing funny comedy, and hopefully inspire people that way.
Absolutely. So we didn't really do any prep before we went on air, so I don't want to throw you on the spot. So whatever you want to share, feel free. But how did you first come to know Jesus? Was it at a young age, or because you're not very old, you look like you're fresh out of college. But at what point did you find a relationship with Jesus for yourself?
Yeah. So I would say I was raised in a Christian family. I think it was a little, not a strict Christian family, though. We were kind of, we go to church a few times a year. Christmas, Easter, my mom's birthday. It's more because it was important to her. So it was something that I kind of had in my life growing up, but wasn't necessarily like the biggest thing for me. I have one older brother, and I'd say he was actually kind of instrumental in that as well, because when I started getting a little bit older, going to high school and eventually into college, I feel like I started taking a closer look at what was important to me, and kind of the driving factors in my life in general. And faith started to be more important. I'm trying to think how to phrase this, because that's an interesting question. Yeah, I would say I have a particular. I didn't have like a come to Jesus moment, or a turning of the city key, so to speak. But it's something that's definitely fundamentally important to me on a day-to-day basis, because it's tied into why what life is, why are we here, those big questions. And I think it was something that when I started getting a little more cognitively developed, that really needed answering, and helped me find out just who I am every day. So I'd say I was kind of involved. Involved in growing up, but when I was older, it started to become a sort of foundation for who I was in general. Just I think love is a really important part of that for me, and that shapes, or tries to be how I live every day. And yeah, when I was probably high school, going into college, that helped me find who I was, what I should be doing, what I felt like I should be doing, and why I feel like we're here in this world in general.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm gonna give a vague answer.
Well, I've said before, and I think that when you have, everyone kind of thinks that, well, if you're Christian, it's because you've had this huge moment where it becomes a crutch. And I think sometimes it's harder to have a faith when there hasn't been that, like you said, come to Jesus moment. Like it seems like you're kind of raised in it, and you've made it your own without needing that tragedy or that hard story. And I think that the enemy sometimes uses those, not easier, but those situations to kind of lull you to sleep, to make you think you don't need Jesus because things are okay. So I think sometimes it's harder to find faith and make it your own when you don't have that tragedy or that come to Jesus moment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's true. I mean, I think I've had a pretty good life, and I mean, the other side of the coin to that, to me too, is I see a lot of younger people where feel like they're super involved growing up because their parents kind of push that on them, and that ironically ends up pushing them more away from faith as they get older because everybody wants to make their own decision, right? Everybody wants to be a little rebel
Mm-hmm.
when they get older. So shout out to my parents. I think that was something they did better, was just exposing me to what they said, this is kind of our way of life, but they let me more or less make my own decisions, and my brother as well. And now that's a much bigger part of our lives, especially for him. He's been a youth group leader, and he's involved with RMR, which I'm forgetting what that stands for right now, but it's a group that takes high school Christian groups up in the mountains and does ministry and backpacking with them, and and I think that wouldn't have happened if that had been something that was really, really forced on us necessarily.
So outside of Oxymorons Comedy, what do you do? Because I'm sure that that from personal experience, I'm guessing that working for Oxymorons is not paying your bills. So what are you involved in outside of comedy?
Right. Maybe someday, right?
Right.
When we get our huge sign-on bonus for PureFest, I'm sure we'll be able to quit our day jobs. So
I'll give you a couple of fishes and loaves, and we'll see if Jesus multiplies it.
Yep. So my undergraduate was in engineering, and I was a minor in theater. So I currently work out on an Air Force base out here. I'm a orbit analyst specifically. Okay. So I help run a constellation of satellites for the U.S. Air Force, AEHF Milstar for any space geeks out there. But it's a network of military communication satellites. So I do kind of the high level. I help work with the high level management, the orbit management. So we look at moving the satellites if we need to, making sure that they're safe with other satellites and space debris, that we're not running into anything. There's like a lot that goes into it. We interface with a lot of other teams, just thermal concerns, make sure power. We all kind of have our fingers in. That's my day job. Like I said before, though, comedy is something that's really, really important to me, that I'm really passionate about. So I do as much of that as I can. I'm involved in a few other groups around town for, comedy, sketch. I do stand-up as well, other improv, and that's what I do that's more or less what I do outside of work. And hopefully someday that could be what I do for work. But as I'm sure you're aware, that's not the easiest thing to do.
No, I keep praying that the Lord will let me win the lottery, so that way I could focus strictly on ministry work. And I've told him I won't let it change me, and I'll prove it to him.
Of course. Yeah, that's how you'd prove it. Well, good luck to you.
Absolutely. So when I hear you say that you work for the Air Force, first thing I think of is the one base that they always reference in movies, NORAD. Is that where you're at, or can you say that?
No. So Colorado Springs is a huge military hotspot. So there's like something like 5 different bases out here. We've got an Army one. There's NORAD, the Air Force Academy. There's Peterson, Schriever Air Force Base. So I'm at Schriever, which is a pretty large base, but yeah, it's not as famous as as NORAD.
Well, I'm a kid from the '80s, so my first memory of military is war games with Matthew Broderick and the NORAD with the big giant
yes,
steel doors.
Well, it's actually interesting. The program that I'm working on started back around then with the Cold War with Reagan. They were, worried about World War III with Russia, so they started dumping a lot of money into having an emergency backup communication system so that it wouldn't be easy to take out a couple locations in the U.S. and then shut down all of our communication, because that's a important thing for your day-to-day life, but also for military in the modern day. You can't do anything offensively or defensively if you can't communicate with the rest of your military around the world. So they commissioned the MilStar program as being a communication network that would be secure and above all that, in case people started dropping nukes, which thankfully didn't happen. But that's originally how it started, and then it's still going.
Ryder is a really cool guy, and he's got a very cool job. And I just hope that we're not unwittingly sharing some national secrets here. So I guess we're just going to have to wait and find out. Really looking forward to meeting Ryder and his gang from Oxymorons Comedy this weekend at PureFest, which is a huge event coming up Saturday, September 28th at Crosspoint Church in Lockport, Illinois. Huge shout out to Crosspoint Church for all their support in making PureFest happen. But not only is that going on, but on Sunday, September 29th, Well-Versed Comedy, the improv wing of Gifts for Glory Ministries, Well-Versed Comedy is putting on The Decent Comedy Show. That's the name of our show, The Decent Comedy Show at Second City. We're out to prove that clean comedy has a place, that comedy that's accessible for all ages, all walks of life, for families, for kids, for adults, for mom, dad, grandpa, and everybody in between. We're out to prove that, and we believe that we're going to do that Sunday, September 29th, Second City in Judy's Beat Lounge. We hope that you'll come out. If you can't make it to PureFest, or even if you can, it's just $10 per person to go to Second City and enjoy an evening of clean comedy starring Well-Versed Comedy. We're going to be really excited to have you there. And you can find your tickets on the Second City website. Just look for The Decent Comedy Show. That's The Decent Comedy Show. Or look in the show notes for the link to get your tickets. There's only 60 seats available, so let's pack the house. Sunday, September 29th, 6:30 p.m., The Decent Comedy Show starring Well-Versed Comedy at Second City. So we're going to be back in just a moment with more of an interview with Ryder Tam from Oxymorons Comedy as we talk comedy, faith, PureFest, and so much more. And that's all coming up right here on the Gifts of Glory podcast, where we celebrate and promote men and women of God using their gifts for His glory.
So let's talk a little bit more about Oxymorons. What does your show typically look like? Because it looks like on some of your video you do a lot of the shorter form games, but it also looks like there's some stand-up mixed in, or was that part of a game that they just put in the highlight reel?
Yeah, definitely. So as a group, we're a short form improv group. So that's what we do, short form improv. The shows that we put together, we usually have a stand-up comedian perform at the top, and a lot of us in the group come from a stand-up background, so sometimes we have someone in the group do that, but we've been fortunate to have some national comedians on there. I think our last one was James R. Zingelman, for example, and we've had a couple of them have been national level comedians from typically from your clean background, not necessarily I would say not necessarily part of Oxymorons or anything like that, but it's again just that idea of bringing people in from different audiences. So just as we want to reach people that might not necessarily go out to a Christian show, we also want to reach people that might not go out to an improv show. So being able to throw in like a stand-up piece, and I think is a good way of bringing in other people. We also usually do a little bit of testimony at the top, kind of something similar to what we're doing right now, just talking about what comedy is to us, what faith is to us, just to give people a quick idea of our basis of where we're coming from before they see the rest of the show, which is not preaching.
Absolutely.
And then individually for our members, we all bring in, like I said before, I feel like the group was brought together with a bunch of people from different walks of life, from different backgrounds in comedy. So we do, we do short form comedy, but we have people that were come from a stand-up background that were doing stand-up comedy for a living even, and so they bring that kind of strength, maybe hitting one-liners more like that. We have some people that come from a theater background that are maybe stronger with doing characters. I come from a more long-form improv background. My original training that got me really interested in improv was out where you're at in Chicago there at IO. I took an intensive out there and loved that, and so I try and bring that to the group, and so that all comes together in a nice conglomerate. But we're mainly short form improv with people of different backgrounds, and we mix in a little stand up at the top and a little bit of testimony as well, and think and music as well when we can, actually. So it's we try and mix a few different things together and make a tasty soup.
Nice. And we're really looking forward to seeing you guys. And as you mentioned during the intro, it'll be this coming Saturday at Crosspoint Church, Lockport, Illinois. PureFest is going on starting at 1 o'clock. And we will have you guys on, I believe, our second act. So no pressure to open strong, but you got to keep the momentum going. So there's a different kind of pressure there for you guys.
Sure.
But we're really excited to have you guys.
Well, we're super excited, and especially to be forming at something like PureFest. I was real excited when I saw that was a thing, and also to be out in Chicago, or the Chicago area, which is such a the home of improv. It's gonna be a great time.
We're looking forward to it. Now, I know that you're bringing, I believe, 3 people, yourself and 2 others. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So who else coming with you?
So we're gonna have Allison and Nikki are gonna be the other 2, and there's a couple friends of ours coming as well. A lot of our other group was busy traveling to other places, so they really wanted to come, but we're unfortunately not able to this time. Next time, maybe. Yeah,
I know that Tripp is celebrating his 30th anniversary, so congratulations to him and his wife. Because I said, well, tell her that for the anniversary you're buying her a trip to Chicago, and then
right. She might see through that.
Right.
Will be the only issue. Yeah, I think so. Richie, another member of our group there, is traveling for some family thing, unfortunately, and then Jed is one of our guys that comes from a stand-up background. He's actually I wish he could talk about that a bit more. He comes from an interesting background. He was doing stand-up professionally, and then he managed to turn that into a speaking job, and he could say more about what that means exactly, but he ends up traveling all over doing I guess what you could liken to motivational speaking. So he's got an engagement the same weekend somewhere else.
Gotcha. Very good. Well, we are definitely looking forward to it. And one of the things that I do on our interviews and the podcast, just to kind of get to know our guests a little bit better before we let them go, is we do what's called the interrogation. I got 7 questions that are pretty quick. We'll just
Okay.
see whatever comes off the top of your head, and we'll go from there. So, for the interrogation, first question: who would you say are your comedy influences?
Intriguing. I'd say Brian Regan
Mm-hmm.
from, gosh, they're going to be stand-up because that's kind of what's mainstream, right?
Right.
But yeah, I'd say Brian Regan, Gabriel Iglesias were the 2 comedians that I started listening to that really inspired me when I was younger. And they're pretty big, but I love what they do. I love their personality, and I love where they come from with comedy. And I've been fortunate to see them live, and I think they have that something that I think is really important in comedy, both for being successful and for why I perform comedy, is that connection
Mm-hmm.
with the audience. I feel like they're really helping uplift people. I think for Iglesias, that might not come from a faith standpoint necessarily, but he's really good at connecting with people. And for those 2 comedians in particular, I feel like people walk away from their shows more than just having had a good laugh. I feel like they're really uplifted through comedy, which is something that I think is important, and I want to be able to do myself.
All right. All right. So, second question is: you said that you and Oxymorons have done a lot of charity work. What's been the favorite charity that you've worked with so far?
Yeah. So Share and Care is one we've done a lot with, and that's a food bank in that operates in southern Colorado, and that's really important. I guess I'd say there's being able to help people get a meals when they might not be able to
Mm-hmm.
afford them is that's kind of fundamental to survival.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We haven't actually started implementing it yet, but we started working with 7-Eleven recently, actually, and they're going to be helping donate money for our upcoming charity show. It's called the Hunger Games out
Nice.
here in Colorado Springs. So that's going to be it's going to be supporting that, and that's a collaboration show we do out here where all the proceeds go to charity. In this case, the Care and Share. Yeah, so
Nice.
we're hoping to do bigger things with that, and I think this iteration of Hunger Games so Hunger Games has happened before. It's just Trip has run that through different groups, and this time it's going to be Oxymorons, and it's looking like it's going to be bigger and better this year.
Nice. And when is Hunger Games?
It's going to be in November.
Okay.
And I'm spacing on the specific date off the top of my head, but it is on our social media, or website, oxymoronscomedy.net, and we're on Facebook and Instagram as Oxymorons Comedy, so it'll be up on there.
Very good. All right. So you do a little stand-up. You do improv. Which do you prefer, improv or stand-up, or do you find both equally important?
You're giving me a cop-out answer. I find them both equally important. They're very different. I'd say enjoyment-wise, I absolutely love improv, and I want to be doing improv the rest of my life, no matter what I end up doing as a job or mainly in life. Improv it's something that's collaborative, right? It's something that's just, to me, it's pure creativity, being able to create something on the spot. That's also why I come from a long form background. Is I feel like you can't get more creative than starting with pretty much nothing, and then building a whole reality around that with other people. That being said, if you really want to be successful in comedy in general, I feel like you got to do more than just improv. And so stand up something. It's hard to compare them as well is also how I would put it. They're so very different. The communities are different. Performing them is different. Watching them is different. So while they both fall under the umbrella of comedy, I think it's not just apples and oranges. It's it's apples and socket wrenches. Yeah. So I like stand up. I like being able to kind of prepare material beforehand and try and give that my voice and continue working on a set. That's something that's fun. I think it has its own challenges, especially being up there by yourself. I find stand-up a lot more intimidating than improv, which sometimes surprises people because you don't have anything prepared for improv. But I think there's a security in that and in being up there with other people that you enjoy being around, hopefully. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I like them for different reasons. Nice. But improv is definitely where I come from.
All right. So, gonna get serious here. What's your biggest fear in life?
Ooh, that's interesting. You ever see Lord of the Rings?
Honestly, I haven't.
Ooh, okay.
But I'm sure most of our listeners have. I'm just one of those that I just never got into it. It just didn't appeal. I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, gosh, having said that, I feel like the logical thing would be the undead ghost army. But Eowyn in that says something really important. And gosh, I hope I'm not seeming super nerdy with coming from this standpoint. I do very, very many masculine jock things. So don't get the wrong idea. But Aragorn asked her that very same question, and her answer is pretty much that being able to not live up to your potential, I guess. And I want to find a different way of phrasing that, but that kind of resonates with me. I feel like we're here in this world. We've been given, especially for people that are involved in performance like this, we've been given some abilities and skills and talents in that area. For example, I think everyone is in the world for a reason, and not living up to that would be a fear. Not being able to do what I feel like I can or that I'm meant to do is a fear. Unless you're looking for something like snakes. Yeah.
I think snakes are a given because they're the reason that we're out of the garden. Because they're sneaky. So what's your favorite short form game?
Ooh, favorite short form game. That's interesting. I like pocket lines, which I guess if anyone isn't aware, you get the audience writes down lines, and then you work them into your scene by reading them on the spot and not knowing what they are. So I like being put on the spot, and that really forces you to do that. And it also involves the audience, which is something that I think is unique to improv in a lot of ways. So anything that involves the audience is great. Anything that really forces you to be creative in the moment is great. And I also enjoy scene-based games because, as I said, I love the creativity of creating a whole world. So while step-out games are fun and they can be super funny, I like ones where you can create a little world around you. So that's a game that has all of them.
Nice. And I enjoy pocket lines, or we call it blind lines, same concept.
Okay. And there's probably 50 different names around the country.
And the funny thing is, when you let the audience write it, they know that you're reading something that somebody's written. So when you can't read somebody's handwriting as you're pulling it out of your pocket, they get as big a kick out of there as just the ingenuity of trying to use it in the scene. I think that's
Absolutely.
one of the fun parts of improv is watching the struggle and watching the creativity out of the struggle. It's just
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I think that it lends itself to a better, more accepting community as well, because people don't mind when you mess up because they know that you're just doing it on the spot. It's a big difference with the type of audience you get. I feel like with stand-up audiences, you get people that are there who are like, all right, you think you claim you're funny. Let's see if what you got is really funny. And then with improv audiences, I tend to see more people that want you to succeed, that are there like, wow, this is a really cool thing you're trying to do. I want to see you do well.
Absolutely. So what is your worst memory from being on stage? Has there been a set where that just went wrong or anything like that?
So I'm going way back to actually before I was really involved in performance. I did a talent show for the University of Colorado Springs cross country team. So I used to be pretty involved with running there, and that was not the worst memory because it went super well. My good friend and training partner David Marino and I put together this satirical kind of news report that referenced a lot of members on the team as a comedy thing, and we ended up winning the talent show. It was great. But one thing that came out of that was they wanted us to perform at this sports banquet for the school because they thought it was so great, so funny. So I guess this would actually be my first like stage experience. It's good. It's a good thing it didn't put me off of performing in general. But so we did the same thing. We put together this kind of satirical news report, and we performed up on stage at this sports banquet thing, and it just completely bombed. Didn't Yeah, it was the wrong crowd. It was kind of like a pump up event. It was this rah sports thing, so people weren't really there to pay attention. A lot of people were there because there was a bunch of free stuff there, so they were hanging out. There was music in the background. Half the people weren't listening, and that's not a great place to be trying to do what was, I guess, essentially closest to stand-up comedy. So man, it was really painful. We didn't get a single laugh. It was that kind of thing where as soon as it started, I realized how badly it was going to go, and I didn't have any idea how to handle that other than to just keep going, knowing that every next thing we said was going to continue to not get any laughs and to just bore the people that were that were half paying attention. So yeah, I didn't come back out from under my rock for 3 weeks after that.
Wow.
But yeah, fortunately, I started getting involved with theater still after that. That was pretty tough though. But I think overall, any bad experiences you've had, and that helped me get used to that, because I think you're going to have a bad experience on stage as a performer. There's no professional stand-up comic that hasn't had a show go poorly, and you just got to get used to that, right? It's going to happen, and I think it's a good experience that's helped me grow as well. So
absolutely. All right. So final question. Other than the hallowed stages of PureFest, where would you like to perform, either with Oxymorons or personally?
IO Chicago.
Nice.
That I think is. There's so much history. There's so many great performers that have come out of that, and then for me personally, I mentioned that's how I got my start more seriously in improv, was taking an intensive out there. So I try and come out to Chicago whenever I can, and that's always where I go to see shows. Well, I mean, I go to other places as well, but that's always a favorite for me. So being able to perform there, and I guess we did a student showcase, so maybe technically I have, but that's just for friends.
Right.
Being able to perform out there would be super important to me because I think it's such an incredible place, but it's also helped get me more seriously into improv.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we are recording on a Sunday morning, and we both have to get ready and head out the door for church. So, Ryder, I thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, and really excited to see you perform on the wildcard team, and also to see Oxymorons perform for us on Saturday, September 28th. Ryder, we wish you all the best and a safe journey from Colorado Springs to Chicago.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Dave. I was excited to be here, and we are super, super looking forward to PureFest and just meeting all the other performers. I think community is such a big part of improv, so thank you for putting that all together and for bringing people from all around the nation. I can't wait to meet everyone. I can't wait to meet you and see what everyone has to bring.
Sounds great.
So a huge thank you to Ryder Tam of Oxymorons Comedy for joining us on the Gifts of Glory podcast. Really looking forward to meeting him again at PureFest. That's coming up in just a couple of days. Doors open at 12 p.m. on Saturday, September 28th. Hope to see you there. Bring the whole family. Tickets are $10 each. For families of 4 or more, no matter how many people in your family, just $35 for the whole family. It's a family event. We want everybody to come out and enjoy great comedy, great drama, great sketches. It's going to be a lot of fun. We hope to see you at Crosspoint Church, Lockport, Illinois. Find out more information at purefest.org, purefest.org. That's where you can buy your tickets in advance or bring cash at the door, and those are just suggested donations. So if you're in a situation where you can't afford it, you're looking for something to do with your family, and you just don't have the extra, don't worry about it. Just come, let us know, and say, hey, I want to come and enjoy it, but I don't have anything. Nobody is going to be turned away. This is a family event. This is an outreach event from Crosspoint Church. It's not about money. It's not about anything like that. The money is just a seed so that we can put on an even better event for next year. So come no matter what. We want to see you there. PureFest, Saturday, September 28th. At Crosspoint Church in Lockport. Now, as I said at the top of the show, I'm going to take a couple weeks off and be back, scheduled to be back with a new episode of the Gifts of Glory podcast on October 16th. So we're going to take 2 weeks off to decompress after PureFest and the Decent Comedy Show and everything else that we have going on. So I will be back with a great episode, another chance to speak with somebody that's using their gifts to honor and glorify God. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Ryder Tam for joining us. And thank you for joining us at PureFest. I'm thanking you in advance because I'm counting on you to be there. PureFest.org for more information. Looking forward to seeing you there. And if you can't make it to Lockport, coming out Sunday night. And that's going to be at the Second City in Chicago, the Decent Comedy Show. All the details are in the notes for the show. We'll talk to you soon on the Gifts of Glory podcast, where we celebrate and promote men and women who use their gifts, talents, passions, and desires to honor and glorify God. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.